Hello and welcome to World History in the West. This week's lecture is Exploration and Encounter. We will look at how the Americas were discovered and the motives behind exploration. In addition, we will learn about the colonization of the Americas. Brief introduction. By the 15th century, legends of a far-off land had developed and spread. There was the legend of the Irish monk St. Brendan who claimed to have found a new land across the ocean. Celtic and Phoenician seafarers who had been to a distant, never-before-seen land. In the case of the Vikings, it has been confirmed by historians that they reached present-day Newfoundland and established a settlement around 1000 AD. However, Europeans were more focused on finding a quicker route to the riches of Asia, where they could trade with the Chinese, a far more advanced society than their own. The new and unknown lands they encountered would change the world forever. Here are some specifics on the lecture, Exploration and Encounter. The location, Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Time frame, the 15th to 16th centuries. Some of the topics that we'll be looking at, advancements in navigation, the route to Asia, the discovery of the Americas, exploration and colonization of the Americas, and the very important central question of the week that you'll be able to better answer by the end of the week. Was the West simply the perpetrator and the peoples they encountered their victims? So remember that question as we go through the material associated with the topic. The broader picture. When we talk about exploration and expansion or encounter, we have to remember that this is happening concurrently with the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment, all of which we will talk about in future weeks. Motivation to explore. Chinese civilization was superior to Western Europe in terms of technology and wealth. The overland journeys of Marco Polo to Asia during the 13th century and his book, The Travels of Marco Polo, inspired Europeans to seek a quicker route to Asia. They wanted easier trade access to the riches and technology of Asia. However, the Chinese were not very interested in the inferior technology and products of Europeans. However, they were very interested in gold and silver. And so the European desire to explore was not so much for new lands, but to find a quicker route to Asia. Routes to Asia. The overland route from Europe to Asia was known as the Old Silk Road. This was a very long and dangerous journey for traders that could take several years, and there was no guarantee they would ever return. They could be robbed, delayed due to war in a region, or forced to pay a tax for crossing various lands. This motivated European nations to find a quicker route to Asia via the seas. Exploration begins. The Portuguese led the way in developing new navigational technologies and practices. Prince Henry the Navigator set up a school to train mariners. The Portuguese began to explore further abroad in the 15th century, down the coast of North Africa, and beyond the Azores, Madeira, and the Canary Islands. A better understanding of ocean currents, the development of the compass, which was based on Chinese technology, allowed the Portuguese to travel further abroad. Previously, they were limited to traveling within sight of land or were dependent on surveying the stars, unless it was cloudy. The success of the Portuguese motivated other European nations. Bartolomeu Dias and Vasco da Gama. Portuguese sailor Bartolomeu Dias continued exploring down the coast of Africa, reaching the Cape of Good Hope in 1487. This is the tip of South Africa. Vasco da Gama built upon the discoveries of Dias and sailed around the tip of Africa in 1497 to the Horn of Africa and eventually reached India. The Portuguese were able to establish lucrative trade with various Indian port cities. Other European nations would soon take notice. Vasco da Gama's journey. Initially, the rulers in Goa and Calcutta, two Indian cities, were not interested in what da Gama and the Portuguese had to offer. Da Gama then captured an Indian ship, cut up a sailor, and sent the body parts to the Indian city rulers. He thereby forced trade with these rulers. Soon, other European nations would establish trade with Indian port cities. Centuries later, the British would come to control all of India. Magellan's journey. Commissioned by the Spanish crown, Ferdinand Magellan would set off to circumnavigate the globe in 1520. Magellan would die in conflict while in the Philippines, but his crew would eventually return to Europe. Discovery of the Americas. The desire to find a quicker route to Asia inadvertently resulted in the discovery of an entirely new continent. Commissioned by the Spanish, after being rejected by the Portuguese, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He had previously sailed along the coast of North Africa. The ships that he used in crossing the Atlantic were the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. He landed on what was likely the Bahamas. However, he thought it was the outlying islands of India, and he called the people Indians as a result. Clash of Civilizations. The painting in front of you was created by John van der Linde in 1847. A few questions to consider. How are the Europeans and natives portrayed? Is this likely how the event would have appeared? And ultimately, how has Columbus's reputation changed over time? The Columbian Exchange. Although Columbus never realized he had discovered a new continent, his efforts started what became known as the Columbian Exchange. This is the interaction and trade of indigenous peoples of the Americas with the societies of Europe. New goods and resources went back and forth, but this also resulted in the transmission of diseases and the clash of civilizations. The Columbian Exchange. The graphic provided details what resources were exchanged between North America and Europe. Many of these products are commonly consumed and used today. Which items' origins were a surprise to you? Exploration of the Americas. In 1502, Amerigo Vespucci realized this land was indeed a new continent. German map makers named this land America after him. This set off a new wave of exploration by the major European powers of the time. The Spanish and Portuguese explored and colonized much of South and Central America. The French, English, and Spanish explored and conquered North America. Other smaller European nations would also explore and attempt to colonize the new continent. The Dutch were active in North America, most notably New Amsterdam, which would become New York, as well as the Caribbean and later a small portion at the north of South America. And the Swedes helped to settle Delaware. Let's take a closer look at the exploration and colonization of South America. The Spanish and Portuguese were the first to explore and colonize South America. They became very wealthy from the gold and silver they found and traded it with those in Asia for spices and other new technologies. You'll remember earlier in the lecture that we mentioned that Asian societies were really only interested in gold and silver from European societies. Some of the more prominent Spanish explorers included Cortes, Pizarro, Balboa, and Ponce de Leon. For the Portuguese, Cabral and Magellan were significant explorers. Spanish conquistadors were permitted by the crown to enslave the natives within the land they settled. This was known as the encomienda system. This would result in the mass death of indigenous peoples due to slavery and disease. European claims in South America. As a result of the wealth gained from colonization, there was intense competition between Spain and Portugal. In 1494 and 1529, the Pope issued a papal bull, which is a directive from the Pope. This divided South America between the Spanish and Portuguese. These treaties were known as the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 and the Treaty of Saragossa in 1529. Other nations largely ignored this papal bull. Exploration and colonization of North America. Seeing the wealth accrued by the Spanish and Portuguese, the rest of Europe took notice. The English and French and Dutch focused their attention on North America, hoping to find gold and silver. They sent out their own explorers. For the English, Cabot, Drake, Raleigh, Frobisher, and Hudson were prominent explorers. For the French, Cartier, de Champlain, and Verrazano. Instead of finding gold and silver, the French and the British found great wealth through the establishment of the fur trade. European claims in North America. This map details how the French, English, later known as the British, and Spanish would expand in North America. The blue represents France, light red England, and the orange denotes the Spanish. Eventually, the British would come to dominate much of North America after defeating France, culminating in the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Motivation for exploration. A common phrase associated with exploration is God, glory, and gold. Europeans also explored for national wealth, honor, nationalism, competition, resources, and the search for souls. During the introduction of the course, we discussed authentic Christianity, cultural Christianity, and political Christianity. As we evaluate exploration, we need to closely determine what type of Christianity was most evident. Were explorers truly seeking to spread the gospel, or were they simply using this as a tool to gain further power for their nation? Was the type of Christianity spread to other cultures authentic, or just a series of common European customs? Refer back to these definitions within the course intro if needed. When discussing any historical topic, we need to look at the whole picture and determine the good and the bad. The same is true for exploration and encounter. The good, new resources and technologies were exchanged. Expansion of trade, technological advancements, medical progress, and increased access to new foods. The bad, conflict between Europeans themselves and with indigenous peoples. Slavery became institutionalized, the spread of disease claimed the lives of many natives, and loss of native land and culture. Some lecture conclusions. This age of exploration and encounter would change the world for good or bad and help to form the world we live in today. The acquisition of land and wealth would help to propel the West forward as an increasing power in the world, a power that would soon challenge the supremacy of Asia.